Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. And with us tonight is a bit of a special start to the show, Byron Clark. Byron, good evening,
Right.
sir. You're looking beardy enough. Are you happy with your amount of beard for the Big Hairy News?
I'm happy with my amount of beard. Yeah.
How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, all things considered. Yeah.
Just to let people know, Chewy's not with us tonight, but you're going to rip into the start of the show with us. We want to have a chat with you about a few things. And also later on in the show, I've got a conversation that I've already had today with Moana Tuwhare about this big news coming out of Northland. This, in fact, it's the public release of the information that the Treaty Tribunal has made recommendations for Ngapuhi about what the government should do. I find this fascinating, Byron. I feel like this is kind of the biggest story in New Zealand at the moment, especially because of this government. I mean, for this to land, whilst this government, who seems to be trying to sweep as much Māori under the mat as they can, it just makes it for a particularly interesting time that this happened. So, yeah, it's later on in the show. Do you know? Are you across that? Do you know about that? Do you got any thoughts on that?
I'm not really across that yet. No, I've seen the headlines, but haven't done much reading on it yet. So
no deep dive.
Deep dive.
Yeah, so Moana Tuwhare has worked on that claim for the best part of 2 decades. So she's as far as we want to call, an expert in that particular area and a former treaty lawyer. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing that out for people. They'll enjoy it. Right. Cool. Hey, I'd love to have a chat with you about a couple of things. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about was the last time we talked, you had just released the book. And look at me, I had the book up here ready to show, and then I've just gone and taken it away. Here we go. Ta-da! We kind of talked to you around the release of the book, and I'm really interested in finding out how it's been, how it's gone, what's come from the book, what opportunities have been afforded to you, and how it's been since the book's been released.
Well, the book has sold really well. Was on the bestseller list for about a month, peaking at number 3. For a book that's not a self-help book or a biography of a rugby player, it's done incredibly well in New Zealand. Few people in Australia have brought it as well. It is available in Australia, and the ebook's available everywhere. So presumably a few people further afield have got the ebook as well. But obviously, being a book about the far right in New Zealand, it's mostly sold here rather than elsewhere. And I've spoken at a few like literary festivals, Word Festival here in Christchurch, and also got up to Nelson for the Nelson Arts Festival, doing one in Wanaka next year. Done a couple of other speaking events. Spoke for the Canterbury Social Society a couple of weeks ago. Gave a lecture on this topic for the University of the Third Age. So yeah, been a lot of interest in the book. I have just received. This doesn't directly relate to the book, but I applied for the senior journalism grant from the Bruce Jesson Foundation, and I've just received some money to do some articles on climate change disinformation, which is an area I'm quite interested in, because I kind of ended the book on the note that this is what's coming in the future. You know, post-pandemic, a lot of the same sort of conspiracy theories that we saw around COVID, you know, climate change can fit those same narratives. So I'm actually going to be returning to full-time study next year and doing a master's thesis on this topic as well. So yeah, a lot of big changes coming out of the book.
Exciting.
Yeah.
What about you personally? Has there been anything, like we don't need to amplify or talk about it, but you had some interactions with some people over the last few years. How have you personally been since the release of this book? Any blowback for you?
Yeah, I mean, when it came out, there was, there was a fair bit. We did even catch wind of a supposed assassination plan, although
Whoa.
I think more than that being a serious plan, it was probably a few folks on the alt-right trying to impress the others with their bravado and things. So, but yeah, proper security precautions were taken. I was out of Christchurch the actual night the book came out, and then in a different location again for about a week after that. And yeah, that's really died down. I have got court orders against a couple of people now, or 3 people in fact, and others who might be a concern currently incarcerated for I wouldn't say unrelated reasons, but reasons not directly related to myself anyway, related to some of the activity.
And I was just thinking, because when you do something, when you produce something, when you make something, sometimes surprising things come from it. Can you think of a moment that was maybe the most surprising thing that happened to you, or the most surprising connection you made because of the book?
Don't know if there's really one moment that stands out, but I'm hearing from more people than I expected to. I guess it's easy now with the internet. People can just find your email address. I've got my email address just on my website and elsewhere, and so people can just send me an email about the book. And so hearing from people who have brought it, people who picked it up at their library, including one person found it in the Perth Library in Australia and gave it a read, and then flicked me an email. And so it's been good to hear directly from people who are reading it. Another thing I didn't mention was just in the last couple of days, it appeared on a list that Newsroom put out of like the 10 best New Zealand non-fiction books of the 2023. I didn't make it onto the one that the spin-off did, but that was on the one that Newsroom did. So, I probably wouldn't have expected to see my name on a list like that, see something I'd written on something like that, a couple of years ago. I think the success of the book's really exceeded what I expected, but it's a topic that people are interested in right now with everything that's happening in the world, and I think I managed to get something out there that was quite accessible and readable, which there's some great academic work being put out on this topic, but I don't think it's quite as accessible as a book like mine.
Right. Lots of chat in the chat, lots of people in the chat talking about it and congratulating you and saying they read it. Here's an interesting one in particular from Asher A. Huge fan of that book. My daughter used it in her English class with a certain teacher you've spoken with. Obviously, I don't know who that is, but people are using the book.
Sure,
unless they're talking about this teacher I've spoken to. I spoke to an anti-vaxxer teacher way back when, but your book getting used by secondary school students in English. That's kind of cool, eh?
That's pretty cool, yeah.
We should just tell people again, obviously, what a great gift for Christmas. Fear by Byron Clark. There you go. There's a little plug for it as well.
Yeah, I think Mighty Ape even has it 20% off at the moment. So if you're Christmas shopping.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Hey, you're obviously someone who's in the world of mis and disinformation, but you're someone through your past who's also been involved in protest, yeah? Would that be fair? You're someone who's been involved with it. I'd like to play us a clip about, actually I want to play kind of 2 lot of clips, but I want to play us a clip about the protest that happened at Te Papa today, and I want to get your thoughts about it. So let's just go to One News and have a bit of a look at this story to start with. For people who don't know, well, let's just let Simon Della tell her what it's all about.
Police have arrested 12 protesters involved with defacing the English version of the Tiriti o Waitangi exhibit at Te Papa. Abseiling equipment, spray paint and a power tool were used to vandalise the wooden panel. The protest groups say the translation displayed at our National Museum is misleading. Kushla Norman reports.
Dressed like tradies and high-vis, about a dozen protesters walked into Te Papa at about midday. Their target, a wooden panel of the English version of the Treaty of Waitangi. They painted over the third article, a removal of what they say is a translation that misleads and perpetuates a dangerous lie.
99% of the people who go through Te Papa are going to not be able to understand the Te Reo Māori version, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the only legal document, and so they're going to read the English artifact, which can be read that sovereignty was ceded, which is absolutely not true.
Te Papa's had protests before, but today's shocked staff.
It's a real balance, you know. Protest is essential in New Zealand. Museums are a site where we come together to have the really important conversations. Being able to support that is really, really important to us. Damaging things inside of the museum is a step too far.
It's quite a balanced response from Te Papa themselves, kind of going, look, protest is fine, but yeah, the thing that stuck out to me, and I've been watching the Stop Oil protesters in the UK and various groups throwing paint at paintings and that kind of stuff. None of that is kind of permanent damage. Like even the world's most expensive paintings, they're behind plastic for their own protection, whereas a grinder on this thing is permanent damage. And I guess that's what the person from Te Papa was saying. There's a real balance between getting your views out and I guess costing the museum, who knows, tens of thousands of dollars to get something fixed or taken down or whatever. But the reason I'm playing the One News one, and we'll keep watching it, Byron, is there's a really interesting bit where someone comes along and talks more to the idea of how insidious it could be to have the English version out there, kind of like what the protesters are saying. But I guess many people are questioning the extent to which they took their protest. But we'll talk about that when we're wrapping it up. Let's go for a bit more on this news item.
The Te Reo and English versions have been displayed facing each other as part of a permanent exhibition since the museum opened in 1998. Panels between them highlight the differences in interpretation. Those involved in today's protests have been calling for Te Papa to take the English artefact down since 2021.
We are by far from the first people to be requesting this. In the very conception of Te Papa, they had a Māori advisory board, and we know from members of that board that the views of Māori were silenced. That's a quote.
Te Papa says it sought advice.
Look, the way that we develop exhibitions and experience and research, we actively involve and work with our communities and peoples on anything that we do. So it's that's an evolving nature. And look, we welcome the feedback and to make sure that we actually can have the best experience possible.
This treaty law academic says the museum needs to rethink its display of the treaty.
I think we're now at a point where it is misleading to simply say, well, there's an English text and a Māori text and they're equivalent, or that they are of equivalent value or relevance or importance. So I think it is maybe a point where we ought to be reevaluating the way in which Te Papa is presenting that.
Police have arrested.
So that's pretty much the story. We can leave it there. So it's really interesting because people seem to be saying, including the academic, maybe it's time for this English version to not be held up. When they talk about, I mean, you're talking about mis and disinformation with climate change, how often the climate change deniers say, well, let's have a debate, trying to represent that if we have one person, you have one person, they can sell it as it's 50-50 in the world, but really it's like 99-1. So how do you represent that? And I guess what they're saying, what I hear them saying, is that this is not an even 50-50 on these two things. It's not even. But I'm interested in your thoughts around the protest and around the actions of the protest and where you sit on it.
Yeah. So when I first heard that there had been a protest like this and had damaged the treaty, I thought, oh no, because I thought the actual document had been damaged, and I thought if it had been like a just stop oil thing, probably a bit of a step too far. I think it's a bit different than damaging an artwork. But then of course I read about what it actually was, and this is not damaging the historical document. It's damaging a museum display, and not necessarily something I would participate in, but if you want to look at how effective the protest was, I think they really did get across the point they were trying to make. That whole news story, and I watched that earlier on One News, that story wouldn't have been on the news had this protest not happened. They wouldn't have been getting that opinion from the academic and so on. And I think perhaps a lot of people in this country are unaware that in international law, when you've got a treaty like this, it is the one in the Indigenous language that is always used in a legal sense. And and as the protest group was saying, and as others in that piece were saying, it can be a bit misleading to have a next to it this English version, which is not an English translation of the Indigenous language. It's a separate document with different meaning. And I think the curator from Te Papa who spoke, I think, gave a good balanced response. And I think for a lot of people going to that exhibition, maybe if they'd read the other things there in the museum, they'd be aware of these differences, but perhaps not. And perhaps people going to the museum wouldn't read all the signs there. They might just read, the two documents there, and particularly if there's someone from overseas, they're only going to understand the English one. So
yeah, right. But I think what they did say, I haven't been to Te Papa for a decade or so, a bit less than that. But what they're saying is on those podiums, it explains the differences. But like you're saying, it kind of also makes me think about, those debates that were happening, especially around America, about taking down statues of slave owners and they should be taken down and got rid of. I always thought personally that the best thing to happen with those is they should actually be put somewhere, like in a museum, and then it should be written as to who they were and what they did, as opposed to just deleting them, because you can't delete them from history. So I wonder if there would be a middle ground here, whereas they would make it more obvious to the differences. It's not just like on a machine you have to push the button of as you're walking past, but say this is this and this is why there's disagreement. Because for people to give context to this, and this is how I always explain it from a layman's point of view, if I made a contractual agreement with a French speaker, and there was two contracts, there was the French contract and there was the English contract, then I'm only signing on board to the English contract because I don't speak French, which means Māori only signed on to the Māori side of it because they didn't speak English, which is why, especially in the UN and stuff, when they go into Indigenous rights, they always go back to the Indigenous language to make their rulings from. Ironically, which we're going to talk about a bit later on when it comes to Moana Tuwhare and Ngapuhi as well. I was going to play one more clip. This is actually from the TV3 news. They had a slightly different take on one part of it. Let me play it for people.
Those who weren't taken away were still protesting outside the museum.
Hang up some official...
And mostly the reason we're playing this is because of the shirt he's wearing. One of the protesters in some BHN drip there. If the left vote, the left wins. So we had to give credit to at least the other side channel as well.
Of Te Treaty, so our people know, all of our people.
The group remains defiant and wants Te Papa to keep the changes they made.
Well, I think we can all agree that Te Papa will not be doing that. They won't be keeping the changes. But yeah, it's interesting, eh? I'm often think about protest and where is the line, if there is a line. You're completely right that if this hadn't have happened, that academic wouldn't have been on news tonight talking about this issue. I'm still personally uncomfortable with damage, especially to something that's in a museum that's been there for a long time. But in saying all of that, I mean, you could say that 1981, the Springboks tour had violence, and that's how they got their end at the end. And most people would look back on 81 now, see it as a successful protest. Yet there was violence and there was cancelling of rugby games and all sorts of stuff. So probably history is the thing that will paint this as a revolutionary good thing or an overreach in a minute. Maybe we can't quite see that today.
And I would like to see that Te Papa exhibition, now include the, this part of the history as well, include the protests, include the photographs of that there, have that in one of the displays. Because I think that's, that's part of that history that they are showing in the museum now. Maybe a bit meta, but it is. It's because it's been a long time since I've been to that exhibition, but it is not just about what this historical document is, but about the different interpretations over time and the debates around it and things. So I think add that to the exhibition now. It's become a part of that history. Yeah, interesting. Maybe there'd be again. I'm not trying to play both sides and looking for the middle ground, but at the very least, if they fix it and put it back, there could be something in there which is a photographic journal of what happened, why then, and why it was done. And that because look, they talk about the treaty being a living document. This is a part of the life of the treaty right now. What
what we're talking about. Yes, and I do think it particularly interesting, as I've said twice already, when I play the interview for Moana Tuwhare later on tonight, the whole thing that came out of the Ngapuhi response from the Waitangi Tribunal is sort of a confirmation that they never ceded sovereignty, and we're hearing it again now. And we're hearing from the Hobson's pledges of this world and the David Seymours of the world that they did cede sovereignty, and it's just I wonder if this is going to be part of this 3 years protest about the ceding sovereignty, and to get the point across that it was never done according to the Māori version. Don't know, but it's interesting that these things are coming all at the same time, sort of thing.
Totally.
Yeah. Hey, tell me about, I don't mean but you've had some dealings with Helen Houghton. I saw your tweet today. Tell me a bit about Helen Houghton, what you know of her, and I don't know if you've had any interactions. I know that she has highlighted your book a few times in interviews that she's done. Tell me about her. We got some to play.
Yeah, I haven't met her or spoken with her. I've been at least one public meeting where she was the MC, and that was back in 2019 when she was a candidate for the New Conservative Party in the Christchurch East election. Not in 2019. The meeting was 2019, but that would have been the 2020 election. In the intervening time, she's ended up becoming the leader of the New Conservative Party, which she remains at the moment, at least until they have their next AGM, and who knows what will happen after that. But she's at the time, first time I encountered her, I think she was still in the teaching profession. She's left that profession to study law. She's, as far as I know, about halfway through her law degree, and the reason she's studying law is that she sees it as vitally important to take any teaching about sort of LGBTQ plus topics out of the curriculum. And she'd pushed for that as a teacher with like a petition. She's made submissions to select committees, and now sort of sees the need to study law and sort of push for that in other ways. And she's, as I guess we'll see in the clip, she's had a bit of a win because as part of the coalition agreement between National and New Zealand First, the relationship and sexuality education guidelines are going to be removed from the curriculum, which is one of the things that she's been pushing for. Although, as she says, she's going to continue pushing further and make sure groups like Inside Out, which is a charity that provides educational resources around LGBTQ topics to schools, should be making sure that they have no say over the education of other people's children. So don't think we've heard the last of it yet.
It's always interesting when they don't want so-called these groups to have education over their children, but if it was their group, if it was the group about quote-unquote purity and waiting till they'd love to have those words spoken over their kids. But here's a clip from this radio show on an online radio forum today. I don't know if it was today, actually, the last few days. Let's just have a listen to what she said, because there's one part about it to me which is quite I don't know if dark is the right word, but the amount of joy that she has with the idea that relationship and sexuality education is going to be gone from our schools is telling of her background.
You have to be happy with some of the things that have got past the line, particularly around guidelines with REC in schools. I know I have to admit my little heart went pitter-patter on that. How about you?
Marie, it's great to be back on. And yes, I'm buzzing. I'm still buzzing over the policy announcements, many of them actually, things that New Conservative have been advocating for. But yes, especially the REC, because I have been on the show so often talking about that. You can't get the grin off my face. Absolutely. And, when I heard it, I was shocked. I was like, wow, this is a Christmas present. The moment of joy then turned to, I actually shed some tears because it's been a long battle. 5 years, I walked out of school to fight this. And gosh, don't want to get emotional now, but it's
you
huge.
weren't the only one that shed a wee tear, I have to say, on Friday, Helen. So
it just seems so I don't know, dancing on the grave of another policy that you happen to not agree with. But I mean, people have mentioned the chat the word Christo-fascist. Was Helen Houghton featured in your book, or was it just the New Conservatives that were featured in your book?
She featured in the book, not terribly prominently, but I wrote about that meeting that I attended in 2019 that she was the MC of. At that meeting, Elliot Ekeley, who was then the deputy leader, held up a copy of a book about, and it was about transgender teenagers speaking about their lives and their experiences. So the title of it is escaping me right now. And she piped up to say that it only took her 1 minute to find it in the public library, because Ekeley was saying, your rates have paid for this. This is from the local library, and they didn't want these kind of books to be either in schools or in public libraries where young people could find them and read them. So I'd mentioned her in the chapter on the New Conservatives, and again in the chapter on Talanoa Sā, which was the television show hosted by Ekeley and two other former New Conservative candidates. And Helen Houghton would often appear as a guest on that show, and so I'd written about one episode that she was on, talking about these gender-related issues and things there.
It just seems, I understand how some people kind of don't get the whole conversation around gender and the new way of doing things, but just the delight at squashing these ideas and the delight at, having these kids have less information at schools just seems completely contrary to, all the freedoms and liberties that these people on the right so much talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think the wider context here is it's not just that she has, some concern about this material being inappropriate for children or teenagers. And if you look at the guidelines, they're written to be age appropriate. And perhaps there's a legitimate debate to have around, what is and what isn't age appropriate in terms of this kind of education. But Houghton's also been active in a lot of sort of anti-transgender activity. She was there in the gazebo with Posey Parker when she came to this country, and spoke at the rally outside the courthouse when Eliana, the woman who threw the tomato juice over Posey Parker, was appearing in court. I think she didn't actually appear in person in the end, but this protest still went ahead, and so Houghton was there along with others from Voices for Freedom and Speak Up for Women, and I'm not sure if Voices for Freedom was there. I'm confusing them with Speak Up for Women, but others from Speak Up for Women and the Women's Rights Party that ran in the election. So I don't think she's just concerned about inappropriate material being provided to children. I think really she would rather that transgender people disappeared from public life, and not teaching students in schools about the fact that not everybody grows up to identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, and some people don't feel that they fit into a gender binary. It's erasing that knowledge because you want to erase these people, transgender people and non-binary people. You want us to, as a society, sort of not acknowledge their existence and give the impression that the existence is wrong or bad by making it a taboo topic that it's inappropriate to talk to children about.
It just screams of the 1950s when the pregnant teenager got sent away. Don't want to see her. No, get it. Send it to the country for that 9 months, and then she comes back, and the parents happen to adopt a baby that was available from somewhere. It's like a go away, because that's the big thing, isn't it? If it's a part of society, if it's in society, what does going, well, great, they're never going to talk about it in school, actually achieve other than more confusion, more hurt, and probably more issues for the people who are in that group themselves?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, you listen to people who have grown up and realised that they are, perhaps don't fit into the gender binary or fit with the gender they were assigned at birth. And for people who have grown up in a situation where they didn't learn about the existence of these people outside that binary or people being transgender, that doesn't stop them becoming that way, because that's who they are. Great book I read this year was One of Them by Chanel Lyle, and they talk about that growing up in Fiji and not having many examples of transgender people or non-binary people, other than one transgender woman who was a bit of an outcast in the village because of who she was, and going to sort of religious schooling and things, and not learning about the existence of these people and the history of people outside the gender binary, and both in Polynesian society and Indian society, which are their background, and yet still being transgender, being non-binary, because that's who they are. So you're not actually stopping people from becoming transgender or non-binary by not teaching them about the existence of these people. If anything, you're just pushing them to seek out that information elsewhere, which could end up being somewhere less safe. It could end up that rather than learning about this from trusted adults in their life, they learn about it from random stranger adults on the internet. So having this in schools, I think is the safer option for people. And I think it could be, in a number of ways, could end up being quite harmful to young LGBT children and teenagers to remove these guidelines from the curriculum.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Hey, listen, I think we've got to leave it there for tonight. It's been lovely talking to you. Maybe we can, we were going to talk a little bit about Israel and Gaza, but I don't think we can do that in 5 minutes. That requires a much more in-depth conversation. So maybe we'll pick up on that another night. But thanks for jumping in and having a bit of a chat. I really wanted to catch up with you and touch base before the end of the year. And the people in the chat are all going bananas, saying, love you, Byron. So thanks for being a part of us tonight, and we'll talk again super soon, I'm sure.
Wonderful.
All right. Cheers, Byron.
Okay.
All the best. There is Byron Clark with us. We've got a pre-recorded interview coming up shortly with Moana Tuwhare, talking about the news over the weekend that the public release of stage 1 of a decision by the Waitangi Tribunal for Ngapuhi. And I actually, when I saw it on the news in the weekend, I thought, this is huge, this news, because one of the biggest things they're saying, there's two really big things. One of the ones is the Waitangi Tribunal has found that Ngapuhi did not cede sovereignty. That's an official sort of result. And also that they've made the recommendation that all Crown-owned land in Northland, or in the area that Ngapuhi operates in, needs to be returned, or should be returned to Ngapuhi. So it's a really massive story. And I don't think, in fact, I did notice this morning on a couple of the television highlights that there was the breakfast shows we're talking about a little bit, but it feels to me, maybe this is just me because it's an area of interest, to be massive story. So yeah, we'll be having that very, very shortly. I do just want to quickly pick up on another story. Look, I did want to talk a little bit about on why the government won't be taking advice from its officials. It's kind of bizarre. It's a story off Newshub, but maybe we'll cover that tomorrow night when Chewie gets back, because the conversation I have with Moana is about 30 minutes. So we're going to not want to have you guys here until midnight. So maybe we'll leave that one for tomorrow night. But the other story that I did want to talk about was Christopher Luxon and his hypocrisy. So let's do that story quickly. It's from TVNZ Breakfast One News. And the first clip is talking about $5 prescriptions and $5 prescriptions being taken away. And why is Mr. Luxon going to do that? And this kind of speaks to that not taking advice, because all the experts are saying that this is a good thing, but they're refusing to take advice. I did a tweet a bit earlier within the last couple of hours. It's like, this change that they're making, to, I'm just going to get the name of it exactly right to make sure I get it right. Oh no, we'll leave that. To the group who kind of advise the downstream effects of it. The name's just jumped out of my head. So I'm going to go to my Twitter feed and find it for y'all so I make sure I get it right. It is the regulatory impact statement. So this government has basically said they're removing regulatory impact statements. Now, regulatory impact statement is exactly that. It's a group that looks over policy and identifies what the downstream effects could be. This government has said carte blanche, we're cancelling those. So they are literally saying we're not going to have an independent group look over our workings, show us your workings to see if there's any negative impacts from it. So that's the regulatory impact statements. And we talked about Brooke and Veldon last week, the leaked paper saying that the fair pay agreement, that the experts didn't agree with her. And now we're getting it with things like they're getting rid of $5 prescriptions. The experts are not agreeing with these guys, but they're just pushing through with it. And it all comes back to that regulatory impact statements. They've had a second leak out of cabinet already. And this is where Maddie talks to the Prime Minister about the idea of getting rid of these $5 prescription fees. That's actually a really important point as well. And the important point there is, remember, for the past couple of weeks, this government, in fact, in a press release that we're now, or press stand-up that we're now not looking at tonight, this government has been saying New Zealand wants us to do this. We've been put in place because New Zealand wants us to do this. That's been their sort of, oh gosh, you guys are saying silent? Oh, don't do this to me now. Uh-oh, 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 uh-oh. All right. I wonder why this always happens when Chewy's not here. I'm doing two things at once now. What I was going to say is this government for the last couple of weeks, they've been setting themselves up as, the group who are making these changes because it's what New Zealand wants. It's what New Zealand has asked for, right? And the problem with that is that now they're faced with a policy that New Zealand doesn't want, means that they're ignoring it. So for the past couple of weeks, they've been saying New Zealand wants this, so we'll do it. The $5 prescription fee, and you missed obviously the part of the conversation with Maddie. I'll start this a few seconds earlier just to make sure the sound's going before we get back to it. He said that 85% of New Zealanders want this. And because 85 New Zealanders want this, we should do it. It's what New Zealanders want. And they're still cancelling it. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. I'm going to play this in the background. I need you to tell me super quick if you can hear it. Because if you can't, this show is kind of screwed, to be perfectly honest with you. So I've just played a little bit there. Could you hear it in the background? Can you tell me in the chat very, very quickly? And if you can, I will get into it. No sound. Oh dear. This is very, very difficult, guys. And have I gone garbled? Is that what people are saying? This happened last time. Okay. So when this happened last time, I had to leave the room and come back in again. I'm going to do that, guys. And if it means that this thing shuts down because I've got no co-host to stay here while I go out, it might mean that this is the end of the show. I don't know if I leave the studio. I'm not going to end the stream. I'm going to leave the studio. And if I leave the studio, because I'm the only one here, that may end up cutting the whole show down. So I will leave the studio for 10 or 15 seconds, and then I'll come back in. You guys stay there, and I will come back in, and then I'll try and upload it again. This is what happened when Chewy left. Remember that time that Chewy left, and all of a sudden after he left, I was getting garbled sound. I don't know what it was. So I will say I'll be back in 15 seconds. Hopefully this will work. And if when I come back in, everything's shut down, then we'll see you tomorrow night from 9. You guys count from 30 backwards, and I'll be back before you know it. Here we go. Fingers crossed. And I'm back. You're all counting in the chat. You're gorgeous. Guys, this is one of those strange things. There's some quirks in the software that we use. Sometimes it does it. Don't know why. This fixed it last time. Chewy was here to keep talking to you. He's not here tonight, so you got black screen for a bit. I'm going to go back and try and do this again. If it works, then it does. If it doesn't, well, then we'll just talk through this last story, and then that'll be us for the night. Here we go. Fingers crossed. Tell me if you can hear it. Playing in the background. Playing in the background. Playing in the background. Now, there we go, guys. I've played a little bit of it. If you can hear it, let's talk about it. If you can't, then we will. I'm not using voice meter. Nope. Okay. Fucking hell. I'll try one more thing. Here we go. I'm going to try one more thing, guys. I don't know what this is all about. I really, really don't. This shouldn't work. I'll try one more thing. Here we go. Back to the start. Tell me if you can hear that. I'm getting mixed messages now. I'm getting can hear it. Someone saying yes, some people saying no. So I'm not entirely sure. Someone saying can hear it, mate, unless you're just absolutely trolling me there, Smee. Silent on Twitch. I don't. There's some kind of glitch that happens when somebody leaves, like what's just happened there. I don't know why. I'm going to try it one more time and see what happens. Gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. This is so amateurish, but then again, it is what we do. Tell me if you can hear it. Last kind of chance. Go. Oh, good. You serious? Someone's all good. Someone no. What if I turn it down? Does that make any difference? What about that? Guys, there's not a hell of a lot I can do really about this tonight. I'm really sorry. I guess I shouldn't have let old Byron go before we got out of it. That means you could hear the clips when I was playing them for Byron. So that's very, very strange. So it was worked for Byron because I played a clip there, didn't I? Or two. And then it didn't work tonight. Oh, guys, I'm so sorry because there was so much to talk about tonight. We have an interview here with Moana, which we will now then play tomorrow night. It's nothing I can do, guys. I'm really, really sorry. What I can do is have a look at the stories that came with that story. Subtitles. Chewy virus needs a co-host. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going on. I really don't know, but there's really no point actually, because everything I've got tonight, as you can see me flicking, relies on audio and video. That's it for us, guys. We're leaving it tonight. I'm sorry. Technically, it's a super short show, but I will. Oh, okay. I'll try a different clip. Here we go. We'll try Moana for a second, just see if that makes any difference. And if it does, I can play that out for you while because it's actually, obviously you need to hear this. Let me play this for you. Tell me what you think. That's it. I'm not going to play anymore because there's no point just having absolute silence for that long. No silent. This is silent. Yeah, I don't get it. Sorry, guys. Don't get it. Don't know what's going on. No one in the audio podcast will hear this. You'll just hear a wrap up. In fact, why don't I do it like this? This is the wrap up for the show. You ready for this, guys? Hey, guys. Thanks for joining us tonight. Short show tonight. All the best for you and yours. We will catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News, with Chewy being back with us. And we'll get some of those stories we can get to tonight, including the interview with Moana Tuwhare, and have a look at the situation with Christopher Luxon and National picking and choosing what they think they can do. Remember what we've said many, many times. This is my objective for this term, is to, at the very least, hold National to the standards that they held Labor to, right? Number one. And number two, that they've set for themselves. Those two things, right? And they've set for themselves, well, we're just doing this because this is what New Zealand wants us to do. That's the standard that they've set for themselves. We've been voted in and New Zealand wants us to do this. And now when you get something like the $5 prescriptions, where 85% of New Zealand want to keep them, they're going, no, we're not going to keep those. So they're not holding themselves to their own standard that they've helped, they've put on themselves to other things. So we will look at that tomorrow night and other things as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry to have a short show tonight, but that is us for another one. We'll catch you from 9 p.m. tomorrow night for another edition of Big Hero News. Hope you enjoyed Byron tonight. We'll catch you tomorrow night with Chewie coming back. All right, team. All the best.